Dee, I can report a miracle.
What's that?
Everything that can be planted and should be planted before Memorial Day has been planted at my house.
Well, I'd say that is a miracle. That hasn't happened here, but go you.
It hasn't happened here in decades, but I did it.
Mini claps for you.
Thank you. Thank you. Maybe I'll insert applause there. Welcome to the Garden Angelist, where we talk about flowers, veggies, and all the best dirt. I'm Carol Michael from Indianapolis, Indiana, where I have a suburban garden measured in square feet. It's about a third of an acre.
And I'm Dee Nash from Guthrie, Oklahoma, where I garden on several acres out in the country.
We call ourselves Garden Angelists because we are evangelists for gardening. We love gardening and we want others to love it too.
Yes, we do. And we aren't afraid to spill the beans and tell all of our gardening secrets, the good, the bad, and even the ugly. But that's enough of who, what, when, where. Let's move on to this week's episode. So, Carol, you got everything planted.
I did. And so I thought, did I underbuy?
Of course you thought that. That is funny. Keep going.
Well, I got them originally, everything done, like I think it was Thursday. And then Friday I went to Menards, and I know you don't have the Menards, and they had some stuff that had just come off the truck. So I bought a few marigold seedlings, and I bought some herbs to put around my patio table. And so anyway, then I got those all done. I'm like, who is this person that has taken over my body?
I wish she'd come here and take over mine, because
that's what everybody
says.
That's what everybody says. I also, I said I was going to clean up around the bird feeder, and I did. And I got these giant paving stones, and it looks now like it's intended to look like a flower, and it sort of does. I might get one more of those stones.
Maybe you'll take a picture of that for me, because I can't visualize it.
I will take a picture of that for you. But with these big stones, paving rocks underneath, it makes it easier for the birds to pick seeds up off the stones and
not make such a mess in your garden.
Exactly.
Yeah, because I got a big mess in mine too.
I fertilized all my container plantings on Friday. I'm going to try to do that in the growing season, and it has been kind of dry. I've watered the vegetable garden now twice because it's been dry.
Wow. Good for you.
That's it.
All right. So in my garden, not everything is planted, and I'm going to get this crackly thing. I still have these to plant, caladiums. I have 2 bags of caladiums to plant, and I've got a couple of mints to put in a container next to a tomato. I'll try to do that today. And I think I have a couple other things, but mostly I'm done. Mostly.
Well, see, you're not so far off.
No, not far off. I worked all day on Saturday from the minute I quit watching the Chelsea Flower Show on BritBox, which was pretty early. And I worked all day so hard. And this is a funny story. So my son was over, and Bill was working on getting the water hooked back up to the car barn after the fire, because it used to run through the barn. And I should be clear, we had a horse barn and we had a car barn. So everything ran from the horse barn to the car barn. Well, when the horse barn burned, everything got destroyed. So Bill fixed the electricity first, and then he was fixing the water. And Brendan came, I guess he was really tired. And Brendan came by the corner and he goes, "Hey, I'm going." And I said, "Okay, see you later." And he goes, "Hey, Dad's really tired." And I had just slipped on a piece of concrete and dinged my leg. And I was like, why doesn't anyone ever think I'm tired? I don't understand that.
Exactly. There you are, injured and everything. And he's
and everybody's worried about Dad. Okay, so then I dug up the reason I was so tired, I dug up a very rude aromatic aster that was smothering all of its neighbors. And I mean all of them. It had quadrupled in size. And it was because of the rain,
Right.
I also fertilized those daylilies that I dug out from underneath that aster, amended that soil because it's clay with some back to nature compost, cottonseed compost. It's hard to say. And then hulls. And then I posted about that on Instagram on my stories. And I did a bunch of posts last week on Instagram, and I garden coached a client on Thursday, which is always fun and a nice break in the schedule.
It
and
is.
then let's see. I think I just worked all weekend long, except for on Monday, I'm doing light duty after this podcast. I'm just doing some deadheading. So on Sunday, we went to Tulsa to the Philbrook Museum, and we went to see the Rembrandt to Monet exhibit, which meant I went outside and looked at the gardens after, and they are looking really nice. They're in my Instagram stories from Monday, which you guys won't see because this is Wednesday. And I planted a bunch of new stuff. So I just wanted to say that real quickly. I planted a new Phlox paniculata called Garden Girl's Cover Girl, and it's lavender.
Pretty.
And I bought it at Bob Scott's. It also has a little edge inside the lavender that is a good guide for insects. And then I planted Luminary Ultraviolet earlier in the season. That's the one that looks like King Charles's beautiful phlox in his garden. And they are both Proven Winners plants. So if people want to find them, you can find them online at provenwinners.com. No, they did not give us anything to plug this, but that's just an easy place to find them. Or if you are local, you can definitely find the one Garden Girl's Cover Girl at his place, along with some other phloxes. And then I found the Luminary Ultraviolet down in Texas. So that's all.
That is quite enough. I would like to add one more thing that I did yesterday.
Yes, tell me. I'm going to drink a little sip of tea while you talk.
The mailboxes in our neighborhood are all like a black metal. They all look alike.
Yeah.
And mine was looking a little scrangy because some of the paint had peeled off the post. Mm-hmm. So I scraped that down and I gave it 2 coats of paint. It looks beautiful. Got new numbers on it.
I need to put new numbers on mine.
Looks like somebody fancy lives here with her shiny mailbox.
You are fancy.
Let me do a quote because I am not fancy. There is a garden in every childhood, an enchanted place where colors are brighter, the air softer, and the morning more fragrant than ever again. And that is by Elizabeth Lawrence, Southern garden writer from Charlotte, North Carolina. She died in the early 80s, but we both are big fans of her, of all of her books.
I actually got a little verklempt at that one because it reminded me of my grandmother's garden. That's my childhood garden.
Yeah, my childhood garden, a beautiful 7 Sisters rose that would bloom all at once about this time of year. And so, yeah, it's a very sweet one. But our flower today, we thought we would talk about more irises beyond the bearded because there are so many of them, Dee, and you're just shaking your head like, what? There are more?
Keep going. You worked hard on this. So I did not work hard on this because I do have other irises. I have a Dutch iris that blooms in early spring that I bought at Walmart 1,000 years ago. And it's taken a long time to multiply to be more than like one stem. You know what I mean? Like one bulb came up. So I have that. And it's beautiful. It's blue and yellow. It has great strappy blue-green foliage. And it blooms every year early in the spring. And then I have one that is I don't know what kind of iris it is. It's called Caesar's Brother. So you go on and talk and I'll look up Caesar's Brother. It's in my pond.
So the first one I wanted to talk about was this Iris cristata, which I saw this for the first time in a mass planting in spring at the Cincinnati Botanical Garden when I went there decades ago, I don't know, with GardenCom. And it's little and it's blue. And when I say little, I'm saying 3 inches tall. And it looks like somebody took a bearded iris and just shrunk it all the way down. And it's a native plant. Mm-hmm. So I found some at a local garden center and I planted like 4 or 5 plants. And there for a couple of years, it kind of grew and got going. And then it has fizzled out. And I think there's just one there. And so it is a good one if you have like I'd say a wooded area. Mm-hmm. You could plant this. It likes the woods, zone 3 to 8. I wish mine had stayed around longer. I don't know what happened, but it says it doesn't like competition, which
that could
I
be
don't know
a problem,
if competition.
Right?
Yes. Nothing else crowded it out. The ground is bare. So of course I'm going to try again because it is so pretty.
Okay. Sounds good. I figured
And
out.
then,
Go ahead if you want to, or I can tell you about Caesar's
oh
brother.
no, tell me about your Dutch. What
No,
the other
it's
one?
not Dutch. The Caesar's brother is Siberian, and it loves my pond. And I grow it at the edge of my pond. And I sent you a link to it on your text, but you didn't get it because we all both have our texts turned off. But it's a good one. I bought it a few years ago at Bustani Plant Farm, and it has multiplied just right. You know what I mean? And it's a
Yes.
dark blue. Doesn't bloom very long, but it looks really great at the pond while you do it. And then I wanted to point out, as because you're going to also talk about Louisiana iris, which also are grown in wet areas. But we need to talk also about yellow flag iris. And I was trying to look up what the botanical name is. Yellow flag iris is a huge problem. It is very invasive in the United States. And
Really? I did not know that there was an iris that was invasive in the United States.
Yeah,
That
and
is
I need
quite
to look up
interesting.
what its actual it just says yellow flag iris, and I looked up Washington State's information about it. But let me look up what its botanical name is, because apparently I can't type today. But it's a bad one, and people, it's Iris pseudochorus. Iris pseudochorus. It's hugely a problem. And so a few years ago, when I didn't know any better, they sold it as a pond plant because it's very popular as a pond plant, but it multiplied so fast in that first year that I mentioned it to our friend Cindy, who lives down in Katy, Texas.
Yes.
And she was like, Dee, you got to get that out of your pond and do it quick. She said, that's invasive. And I was like, oh no. So I actually pulled it out because then they did a big piece on it on Oklahoma gardening. It's invaded some wetlands. So people should not grow Iris pseudochorus. Instead, they should grow the Louisiana irises. And that leads you right into your next part.
Well, the Louisiana hybrids, I do not believe that I have any, but there's a neighbor around the way, and they have the most beautiful stand of dark blue irises that come up around their utility boxes. And I asked the guy once, I says, what is it? And he says, I don't know. It was here when we got here. You know, they were the second owners, but it's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful stand. And I've decided that those are probably Louisiana irises, but it's just a nice size clump.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like saying, hey, can I dig me up some of those? But I don't.
Right. And they could also be like my iris, my Siberian iris, because those are often in blue.
Yes.
But they might be. I mean, they both have kind of a similar look. They're very popular around wet areas, ponds, like if you have a boggy area, they love that, that kind of stuff. And then you've also talked about, you were going to talk about your other iris, which you said is brown. I used to have a brown iris.
Yeah, I've got this brown iris. I think that it's a Siberian iris, that it's almost ugly. And I hesitate to say that because I actually think somebody sent it to me. But
you said you like it.
It's too ugly not to like.
Right? I have plants like that.
I feel like I'm doing a mission project by letting it grow in my garden because no sane person would keep this thing.
Oh, and here's another mission project. Masha, who the minute you start to talk decides she needs to be over here. I think a beautiful, I had a brown iris. I also had a cranberry one that I really loved that wasn't, your normal coloration. I kind of like those unusual ones. Although I've heard that the dark purple type are really popular right now. And then you talked about the native irises, which are the Pacific Coast irises.
Yeah, there's several, like the Iris cristata that I talked about at the beginning is native. The Louisianas are native hybrids. And then there's the Pacific Coast. And I was reading about those in American Gardener had an article by C. Colston Burrell about native irises.
Yeah, Cole Burrell knows so much about hellebores and irises. He knows a lot about gardening, period. But he's an absolute expert on hellebores, and I guess he's an expert on native irises too. His stuff is always very factual, and I think we should just give another shout out for American Gardener magazine. It is one of the few gardening magazines that's left, and you have to join. What is it that you have to join?
American Horticultural Society.
American Horticulture Society. Because if you join that, you get not only the current issue, the print issue, you get all the back issues too. And I was so proud when they asked me to write last year. I was like, oh my
Yeah, that is
gosh,
neat.
I got to write for American Gardener. That's the epitome of cool.
It is.
Anyway, he has written many articles for them over the year. And if he says something is so, I believe it.
Well, and then to get away from the natives, because that's in that article, I have a Japanese iris, which is Iris insata.
Yes.
And it's very pretty. And I have been very I've had like a half a dozen, and I just kind of move them around because they end up under a shrub or something. And I'm like, move that thing. So they're out front by my bird feeder now, and they bloomed really nice. They were pretty.
What color is it?
I hope they make it. Blue.
Blue. I love blue iris. I really do.
And the first time I saw these Japanese irises was actually as a cut flower, where I went somewhere in college, some horticultural thing or whatever, and they had just taken stems of the Japanese iris and just had like 2 or 3 in a vase.
Uh-huh.
And that was in the, late 70s or whatever. People that was really something to make a simple arrangement like that versus like those big, chrysanthemums and carnations and things like that.
Beautifully vertical and very tender looking, and they have beautiful foliage. And I now see them more and more in arrangements than I used to, but really flower arrangements have come a long way. So
they have.
We had a listener ask a question about Siberian irises on the newsletter, and which is Iris siberica. And I told him that I did not have because he was asking me about how to plant them and all of that. And I only have the one that I know of. I mean, who knows, in this giant garden, I might have one stuck somewhere. I was like, well, the information we gave last week about how to plant irises was all about bearded irises, which is a whole different thing. And I said, I don't have any information. So you went and looked up Eden Brothers, which has a great guide for growing them.
Right. And they say put the growing tip 1 inch down in the soil.
Okay. Good to know. And I just planted mine.
I think the Siberian irises are a better mixer in a perennial garden because they don't have as much foliage, I think.
No, their foliage is shorter. It's shorter and it kind of flares out more. It doesn't grow straight up like the bearded irises. And they do great in the edge of a pond. I'll say that for them. And then you wanted to say the thing. Oh, and I said, I don't have any native irises that I know of. I just have that little variegated iris, which smells like grape jam or jelly. And it's not native either. And it is puny. I don't know if it's going to make another year here. I just don't have time for it.
Well, and there are 3 last things to say about irises. Number one is you can grow iris from seed, Dee.
You can.
If you're a hybridizer, you're obviously growing them from seed. But Eden Brothers has a native Iris missouriensis seeds for sale. If you want to give it a shout,
which is a wild blue iris. I'm looking at right now. Well, that is really.
And
pretty.
then Iris reticulata, the very early spring irises. Those bulbs are now for sale, and I looked, and Brent and Becky have them on their website. I know John Sheepers has a bunch on their website. So if you don't want to get it sold out, it's worth going ahead and placing the order now.
Yeah, it is. And you want to put those somewhere where they don't get too much water. They like it a little bit on the dry side, I found in my garden, and they do not like to be disturbed. And I finally found a spot that they like that they return every year. And that's right outside my kitchen window.
And I have them returning reliably for the last 6 years. And they don't get disturbed. I just this week cut back all the foliage because it gets really long and strappy, and I cut it all back.
Mm-hmm.
But the one iris that of the reticulated type, there's one called Iris Den 40i. That's the only one. It's yellow. It's never returned. I planted it like twice. I get it, and then the next year, nothing.
It doesn't come back. Yeah.
So
I used to never have any of them come back. And now in this spot, I do. And actually, I let the foliage go all the way to dry because they're kind of under a sunshine ligustrum that I've limbed up. And so they don't bother anything. They're just in a spot.
They were just starting to look nasty. And I got that area cleaned up. It's near the bird feeder and stuff. I got all that cleaned up. So I went ahead and cut the foliage back.
Yeah. Boy, irises.
And then, so here's my ending for irises. Mm-hmm. We'll speak no more of them.
Okay.
But clearly, there is no end to irises. just as you can find no end of the rainbow.
Ooh, that's.
It's time for your quote.
We cannot cure the world of sorrows, but we can choose to live in joy. That's Joseph Campbell from Reflections on the Art of Living, a Joseph Campbell companion, edited by Diane K. Osborne. And I looked all that up because some people attribute that quote to Diane, but she was just the editor. And so it's really Joseph Campbell's quote. He was born in 1904 in New York, and he died in Hawaii. Good for him. And he was a prolific American author and editor whose works on comparative mythology examined the universal functions of myth and various human cultures, etc., etc. And he came up with the idea of the hero's journey, which if you write fiction, the hero's journey is a big, big deal.
That's correct. So you came up with our vegetable topic, Dee.
Right, because we were both working on it in our garden, and it was how to support your tomatoes. And you wrote therapy, playtime, quiet time, a healthy diet. So how do you support your tomatoes? Anybody who's read your blog knows.
Well, I'm a staker, and I think that any other method is just, laziness. Just kidding. So my dad always staked them. I stake them. And so I have spiral stakes, and I've written about this in several magazines, but I pound a 2-foot section of PVC pipe as far down into the ground as I can get it. And then you just drop that spiral spike into that PVC pipe, and it'll keep it all nice and neat, mostly. And as long as you get that really deep in the ground, because tomatoes can be big plants.
Yes, if you have indeterminate or pole type tomatoes, they can be 6 feet tall because they produce foliage and stems all along the season, along with fruit. And they are considered long season tomatoes, not to be confused with determinate tomatoes. I spend more time on garden coaching clients' talking about tomatoes because people want to grow them and they're very confused about what's what. And I can understand why.
Yeah. And because you see these little tiny tomato cages at the store, and I just laugh and laugh and laugh.
Those only work for a few tomatoes. They work for the ones that are determinate. They're going to produce all their fruit over a 3-week period and grow to one small size, and then it's over. And that's not even talking about the tomatoes like little tiny Valentine shaped heartthrob, which is only, 7 inches high. Right. And it doesn't need to be staked at all. So hybridizers are working really hard to come up with tomatoes that you can just grow in containers with no stakes. The thing is they don't produce as many tomatoes.
Nope.
I grow a combination of different kinds of tomatoes because I just like the adventure. I like the great tomato adventure. And you have to have some way of staking them. And in my case, I now grow them all in pots down the center of the driveway. And I have a great big piece of field fencing that we used with stakes that we drilled holes in our old asphalt driveway, which we never used anymore anyway. And then we put in concrete dust, and then we set those stakes in there so they're really tight. And then we put the field fencing, like we did the stakes in between the field fencing so it holds up. So I think it's 3 panels, and I can grow up to 25 tomatoes if I want to, although this year I'm growing fewer because I don't need that many. And I stake them up against that fence. And I actually use the soft tie wires to attach them to the fence because they don't show up. They're green. And we're going to link to those. Debbie Clem, who's a friend and client, she actually uses these little clips that she bought at American Plant Supply. And they look really good too.
I buy that green plastic ribbon, I'll call it, that's easy to tear off. I use that to tie up my tomatoes. You do I do a nice figure 8. So one loop is around the stake and one loop is around the stem, and that gives it a little bit of give. So if you have a big wind come by, you don't have a plant that just like snaps right off. Yeah.
That's a good idea. I will say that though, I've used that stuff too, that plastic, and we'll link to it too. I used it also with my roses, my climbing roses and stuff. I've come to really like the wire, and part of it is because I can reuse it year after year. I just take it off at the end of the year when I pull out the tomatoes and hang it on my hardware on the field fencing. And then this year I just went back, undid it, and put up the tomatoes again. So it lasts for, I'd say, 4 years easy. And that's one good thing about it. And then I've also used twine to tie up, but I don't really like twine. I'd rather use the stretchy stuff.
Yeah. My dad used to use strips of old rags and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Old cotton
pantyhose.
sheets. People use pantyhose, anything you can make a nice little strip with to tie.
Who the heck? Okay, here's my question about pantyhose. Who the heck wears pantyhose anymore that they need old? Because back in the old days when I was a legal assistant, I wore pantyhose to work every day. And so I had old pantyhose to do this stuff. But now pantyhose is expensive. I don't know who you are, you pantyhose people, but good for you.
I don't do that.
I don't wear pantyhose.
Let's talk about the other thing called the Florida weave or basket weave.
Well, that's what got us started on this topic in the first place, because you were talking about it to me.
So there's a couple of ways to do this. And we're going to link to an article I wrote on supporting tomatoes for family handyman. And I got a quote from Susan Mulvihill. What she does is she does the stakes like you have. And then she puts the big wire fencing between the two stakes with great big holes. And then she carefully weaves the tomato plant in and out of the thing so that's kind of weaving up. And I'm doing something similar because I had it figured out perfectly, the exact number I needed. I have 14 stakes. So I plant a tomato on each side, which is a little bit dense, but I don't care. So I do 14 varieties, but then you sent me 2 more varieties. And then I'm minding my own beeswax, and Burpee sends me like 3 tomatoes. And so like I have too many tomatoes suddenly.
Do you do you really have too many? Because they're all so great.
No. So I stuck a stake at each end of a garden bed. And then as those tomatoes grow, and they're still seedlings, they don't need staking yet, I'm going to run twine from one end to the other and then kind of weave them up in amongst the twine and see how that works.
That sounds good. I've done it once.
It might be a big mess.
Well, it can be, but you're a good staker, so it'll probably be fine because you'll keep up with it. Some people don't. Hey, I just had a thought.
You did.
This great tomato bounty comes in. We're going to share our favorite tomato recipes. So let me write that down. All right. Anything else you want to say? You wanted to talk about Tumbling Tom and his friends.
Well, Tumbling Tom is a variety of cherry tomato that it's kind of for a hanging basket. And you can put in a basket and it'll just kind of cascade over the sides and you can pick cherry tomatoes.
Cool. Yeah, it is.
Remember when that upside down tomato planter was a big deal several years ago?
I hated that thing. Yeah.
Let's not talk about it. Instead,
both hated it.
I'll do the quote for the next section.
Okay.
Gardens and children need the same things: patience, love, and someone who will never give up on them. And that's Nicolette Souder. And you put this quote on there. She is the creator of a website called wilderchild.com. She is devoted to teaching children through the outdoors. She calls it wild schooling.
So it's a play on homeschooling, but she teaches them outdoors. It probably wouldn't work in Oklahoma because it's too hot in the summer. But Megan said that I talked to my daughter Megan about it because she's got my grandchild. And she was like, yeah, I know who she is. And she goes, I'm not doing that. I said, okay.
Well,
I love the quote.
I think it's Denmark. I could be wrong. And, when we talk off the cuff, we always get ourselves in trouble. But I think it's in Denmark. They have schools where the kids are outside literally all day long in every weather. And they would have snow and, they just stay outside. And it's like, well, that's
tough,
played outside.
People, the Danes.
We played outside quite a bit. We'd play outside. As soon as it stopped raining, we want to put on our boots and go out there and run down the street in the gutter and splash. But, we were kids.
Yeah, it was a different time. Okay, the bookshelf. You have the book for the bookshelf. I do not have this book.
The book is Back to the New Basics by Joe Seals, and it's a practical guide and reference manual to the ways, the whys, and the news, science of better and easier gardening. And Joe sent me this book at the recommendation of our friend Kathy Purdy.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, what is this thing? Dee, this thing is an inch thick. I mean, it's notebook size and
It's
an inch
amazing,
thick.
really.
And Joe is a biologist, horticulturalist with 60 years of gardening experience. And what he's done, he's obviously a teacher. And he teaches a lot of master gardening classes. And I think he's a bigger deal in the Pacific Northwest where he lives, because he also wrote a book about selecting plants for the Pacific Northwest. But this book is, as he says, a no-nonsense, earth-friendly, comprehensive, rounded approach to home gardening. And he's gone through and done so much research on why we do things a certain way. He recommends reading the book from front to back, which I think I will do that this winter. This summer, I don't have time.
Right.
And then it becomes a reference so you can look and, refresh your memory on something. But he starts with soil, because all good gardening books start with soil, and composting, mulching, tools, planting, how-to, watering, pest and weed management, seeds and cuttings, pruning principles, how to garden more like Mother Nature, why gardening makes you happy. He's sprinkled the whole thing with quotes because, as he said, some people just said it better. And while it's basic, it's also not intended to leave out the more experienced gardeners like you and I can read through this, because a lot of stuff just like everybody does it. And so nobody thinks about why we do it. And Joe's done all the research to figure out the why. And as he says in his intro, sometimes, when he followed the science, and as he said, science is always challenged and always, I don't want to say reinvented, but there's always a challenge. There's always new information.
Right.
You have to think about the things you always did, and rototilling is the perfect example.
Oh my gosh.
Everybody tilled. Now it's like nobody tills.
Right.
And even though he's in the Pacific Northwest, he does intend for this book to be a national scope across the United States. And so it is very good. There aren't a bunch of pictures, not talking about a bunch of plants, but I'm going to tell you something, Dee. I looked at this book and I set it aside. It's like, what is this? What is this? I really like it.
Yeah, it sounds like you love it, and it's a good book.
Yeah. And I feel like that going to, and he teaches classes, and I looked online somewhere and they were all sold out, no doubt. But I feel like that this is a good book in September. I feel like I'm going to school and I'm going to go read through the 22 chapters. And from September to March is what, 22 weeks? Is that 22 weeks? I don't know.
That'd be about right, though.
I thought that this is a good read. I like it. And I've already looked up a couple of things just to see what Joe says. And I really like the science that he puts into it. And so I'm really pleased to have this and that Joe sent it to me.
That's great.
So that's Back to the New Basics, a practical guide and reference manual to the whys, the ways, the whys, and the new sciences of better, easier gardening. Joe Seals. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Want me to do the next quote?
Yes, it's a long one.
I noticed that. I love it, though.
I'll just sit back here and listen.
Sit back and get ready. Okay. When I die, I shall go to May. It will be green, not environmentally correct, for things will just be without measurement or judgment, but actually the color green in all its 1,000 shining faces. Every day will feel like Christmas Eve when I was 10. Every green leaf will be perfection, exactly as it is, and yet will grow and change every time I eyes to it. Every moment will be like the arc of a diver breaking the waters of a green lake. I know this because this is what May is like here and now. Almost unbearable, really. It does not hold for half an hour, yet in the shifting, growing hymn of light and color and leaf is the still, simple reason that I garden. That is from Monty Don and the Ivington Diaries from 2009. And that is my idea of heaven.
Yeah, it sounds wonderful. And I sent this to you, I think.
I know. Yeah, you did. Mm-hmm. It's
so
a great quote for the last episode of May. And that's, I think that quote is why people love Monty Don.
Yes. And I'm going to confess that the Ivington Diaries from 2009 is out of print, but good used copies are still available.
I might have to go buy that because that is beautiful. So our dirt this week just ties right into that quote, and it's called Living Kitchen, Farm, and Dairy. And my friend Karen Collier got me to go to this because she sat and looked. Okay, so let me explain first. All right, so they hold community dinners, and it's a little like the Lost Kitchen, but you don't have to send a postcard. What you do have to do is get on their website on these certain open days for reservations. Okay. And she sat on Saturday morning, March 18th, and got us a reservation. And we went to eat there a week ago on Sunday. And it was scrumptious. It's run by two women, and one is the chef and one is the farmer. And they had to figure out a way that they could keep their farm, and they have goats, and they also have a community. It's like a farm to market garden. And it's just beautiful. And I took some pictures of it. And then the food is all done in a log cabin that looks like it's old because it's a rustic log cabin.
Right.
But it was built the same time mine was. And I had to giggle because Karen was like, I cannot wait for you to see the cabin. And I was like, because I live in a log cabin. And so we got there, and it is a great log cabin. And they have a fire pit out front, and they do s'mores after the dinner. And anyway, the dinner opens up with just beautiful hors d'oeuvres, fabulous hors d'oeuvres. I send you pictures, and you bring your own wine or beer or whatever you want to drink, and iced tea if you want to. And they supply all the glassware, supply all the food because they don't have a liquor license. And we were just waited upon, and it was beautiful, and the food was lovely, and each dinner has a theme. And so we are going to link to it in our newsletter, and I will actually put in the newsletter about when you can go on there too. The next time is for July through September. You better act fast because it's June 3rd. And then
so where is it located?
Oh, I should say that. Okay, it's located in Depew, Oklahoma, which is just, I want to say, east of Stroud, which is halfway to Tulsa for people that are familiar with Oklahoma City and Tulsa. The food was amazing. The people were amazing. It was just the best night. It really was.
I'll have to see if there's anything like that in Indiana.
Yeah, I think you should, because it was really fun. And when you're in a screened-in porch, so there's no bugs.
Well, that's always a plus.
Yeah. Sometimes you and I have done farm-to-table dinners at various gardeny things, and sometimes it's very buggy. This had no bugs. It was awesome.
Very good. Okay, we'll put the information in the newsletter so that people will be able that live near the area. We just want to fly into Oklahoma to go there. They get a reservation.
Take advantage of it. Yeah. Apparently they always sell out. So it's a big deal. So you have the next quote.
Joy does not simply happen to us. We have to choose joy and keep choosing it every day. Henry Nouwen, a Dutch Catholic priest, professor, writer, and theologian. He died in 1996, but he taught at Harvard School of Divinity, Yale, and I didn't realize this, the University of Notre Dame right here in Indiana.
He did. And he was very, very popular in the 80s. I read several of his books in the 80s. Anyway, I loved that quote. I thought it was a good one.
Rabbit hole time. Rabbit holes.
You go first.
Well, mine isn't very exciting. I had a busy week. Dee. But I have been perfecting my power friend. What? I've been perfecting my flour pounding technique. I've switched my hammer out and watched a few videos of people doing it. I know you hate it, but
I just am not going to do it, but I'm glad you're doing it for you.
Thank you.
Poor flowers.
Poor flowers. You dug up an entire aromatic aster this week without any regret. Don't talk to me about a few flowers being pounded on the table.
He was a B word. She had to come out.
But the thing is, so she's going to be compost.
Yeah, she is already compost.
These at least live in some form or fashion the way they were. You can look at them and remember how they were.
Okay.
On to your rabbit hole.
My rabbit hole this week was Central Texas Gardener, hosted by our friend Linda Lemusverda. And I haven't watched it in a long time. And I had to look up something. I don't know what it was. And it popped up and I thought, oh, I need to watch that. So enjoyable. Such a good show. Kind of along the lines of Oklahoma Gardener. Does Indiana Gardening have anything like this, like your PBS station?
We do
No?
not. Not
Gosh,
that I
you
know
need
of.
one. You should host it. So it's a PBS. It's a PBS show, and they visit gardeners in Central Texas, and they also bring people into the studio for a range of topics. The latest in studio piece was on houseplants, for example. I actually got to go on. I got to go in studio when my book came out back in 2014, and that was really cool. So
we'll
when
look
it's
for that
hot,
episode. We'll look for that episode on YouTube.
That episode is so old. In the afternoon when it's hot outside, this is what I do after I'm tired from gardening.
That is nice. Very nice. Well, let's talk about our garden commissions and wrap this thing up.
I had to laugh. They're the same.
Yeah. Weed, mulch, deadhead, chop things back. Oh my gosh. Fertilize on Friday. It just never ends.
It's the editing time in the garden where you've put in things and now you're taking things out because there's some plants that just want to take over. And when it rains, some of these lovely prairie perennials decide that they're going to just eat up the whole garden. I have to dig up 2 more asters and compost them at least. I mean, when I say I dig them up, I dig them down to be this size, which I just am showing you. That's about how big, Carol.
Our listeners cannot see that.
I know. That's why I'm asking you to tell them.
About
6 inch.
6-inch circle left.
Which they're about right now, they're about a 3-foot circle. So it's quite the job. And a digging fork really, really helps. And I can link to a digging fork in our newsletter. I'm also chopping back any asters I don't dig up. And I have a Drummond's aster that is very rude. And then I also have a rude. I also have a willow aster that's trying to take over in this little meadow area, which, what are you going to do? It's that editing time, but I will say the salvias look really beautiful.
Yeah, salvias have had a good spring. I also want to try to get my house plants outside for that good cleaning. I just flat out ran out of time last week. I
need to do that. I've thrown some away. Does that count?
Oh my gosh, you threw away house plants and you complain about me pounding flowers.
I'm just not going to let that go, are you?
I am not letting that go, but we are going to let this episode go. I'm going to wrap us up. Thank you for listening to The Garden Angelist. I hope you've hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. We publish every week on Wednesdays at 12 a.m. Eastern Time.
If you listen to us on Apple Podcasts, could you please leave a 5-star review? And as everybody else says, if you aren't going to leave a 5-star review, just ignore that I said that. Could you also share our podcast with your friends? Word of mouth is still the best way to get the word out there.
And be sure and check out our show notes for links for more information about today's topics, plus links to our own websites.
And please subscribe to our Substack newsletter where you will find all the good dirt. It's the Garden Angelist at substack.com, and it is linked to in our show notes. Plus, you get the episode early.
That's right. And if you want to help support us, use those affiliate links. If you buy something after clicking through on them, we're in a small commission and it costs you nothing. Or you can set up a monthly subscription through Buzzsprout or make a one-time donation through PayPal. And thank you to all those who have done so. We appreciate it.
It was lovely to chat with all of you over the Garden Gate. Bye until next week.
Bye, everybody.